All right, I'm Will LaVeist. He's Eric ClaVille. You tune into LaVeist and ClaVille, where we give it to you straight the way it is from a Black male's perspective. So what's on today's show? Socialism or survival? Can a guaranteed income help eliminate poverty? Now, Eric, we got a lot of talk going on about these terms flying back and forth. Democratic socialism, capitalism, communism. And I think a lot of it is that a lot of times people don't even really know exactly what it is that they're voting against or voting for. So maybe we ought to break down those terms. So why don't you take a stab at it?
Well, Will, you're exactly right. Now you have these political terms pushing political agendas that's really doing a injustice, to the people and their interests. So when we talk about capitalism, socialism, communism, all right? So when we talk about America, it's the place of capitalism, free reign. You can do whatever you want.
Right. The government doesn't own anything. It's all private industry, private interests. Go for it. Be all you can be. Yeah.
And if you don't get rich, if you don't secure your own future, it's your fault 100%.
Right. Get rich or die trying.
50 Cent, right? the breakout album. But that's not the case. That's not the case. And when we see it, well, first of all, let's just look very quickly at a quick comparison that I found about capitalism, socialism, and communism. So in a nutshell, capitalism allows you to use your own wealth to create, and your own ingenuity to create your own wealth. Right now, of course, you can borrow money. You have to hire people. You have to pay a certain type of wage, or not. And we're finding that some people are not paying those livable or minimum wage. But for the most part, it allows you free reign to create your own wealth. So we got many stories, Will, where people come say, "I came to America with 2 cents to rub into my name," and they pretty much made their way on that one skill.
Now, so private industry controls the goods, services, and like you said, individuals can acquire their own wealth.
That's right.
If they have home ownership, property ownership, all of that.
Yeah, and the great thing about it is what we call contract law. So when you have a contract, that contract is binding between the parties. Now, being a lawyer, I know that when you go line by line, the interpretation of those terms and how those terms were created, how they were, the media, if there was a media on the minds of every term, has created these extensive books that we call contracts, just to buy a bubble gum, right? Because we go through the courts over and over again on certain issues. But for the most part, when you have a contract, that's a contract between two parties and entities with a meeting of the minds that allows them to contract between each other, which the government cannot come into unless there is a reason that's against law and so forth. So with capitalism, that's how pretty much America works. Now, when we talk about socialism,
now let's hit communism first. Hit communism since that's the other opposite. Hit communism.
Oh, right. So communism is the extreme opposite of capitalism.
Right.
Communism says the government controls everything.
Right.
Period. It controls, if you want to create a company, you got to get government approval. If you want to become part of the wealthy elite, you got to get government approval. Right. If you want to open up a business and compete against the government, you got to get government approval.
And so the idea is that everybody in society is equal, and government runs that and government regulates that to make sure that happens. But
in theory, right.
But there's a problem.
Right. It's a problem, because somebody's got to distribute that wealth, right?
Right.
So the person that's quote unquote at the head of the government that's distributing wealth is really the person that controls who gets in and who doesn't, right? So that becomes a major issue within itself. So now let's go to the middle. With socialism, communism is pretty much an extreme of socialism. But when we talk about socialism as it exists in America, right? So America itself is really a mixture of capitalism and socialism. So the government can intercede in public programs, public goods to help people. Case in point, at the turn of the last century, we had the Great Depression. Roosevelt came in with his social contract pact. He pretty much put regulations up on companies, and Wall Street more specifically, from doing what they wanted to do because of speculation. Now, over time, that's been eroded, and we saw what happened with speculation in the dot-com bubble, also in the housing bubble, and we're going to get another bubble in what's the dollar bubble, right?
Right.
You know, people love the last president, Donald Trump, because they made so much money. I mean, my accounts look great. If you got investments in the stock market, they look great. But it came at a cost, right? But then he also included a Social Security program.
Right.
If you work X amount of time, you get this Social Security check to make sure that you can live basic life, right?
So socialism tries to be a bridge between communism and capitalism, and that it provides these social safety nets. It says government should run certain things for the common good so that people could have some measure of a certain standard of living. And so it tries to mix the two.
Absolutely. So Social Security, we also have healthcare that's available for people who are 65 and older. You know, we know that AARP is a big supporter of these programs for the elderly. Right now, they have the largest membership of any group, especially special interest group.
Right.
And as the Lord help us to keep living, you and I will be
get some Social Security. Yeah, get a little bit of Social. And then, but you got the public education system, which is an example of, again, the government, in our cases, state and local governments, but even the federal government has an impact with public education to some degree, to a large degree. Again, trying to make sure that everybody in society has some kind of equal opportunity to at least realize, pursue happiness, all that they can be. So when people are talking about democratic socialism, that's more a bridge even between socialism and capitalism, right?
Yeah. So I want to give a quick historical point to public school education.
Right, go ahead.
And this is a note to African American legislators after the Civil War. There was no public school education before the Civil War. And
a lot of people don't know that, man.
Yeah, before Black legislators got into Congress and state legislators, Black legislators were responsible, in large part, for creating public school education to educate not just African American kids, but white kids as well. Because if you want to be educated, you're educated by the church. And if you were wealthy, keep in mind, our country wasn't too far removed from our mother, which is great. So a lot of people were still used to that, wanting their kids educated in that system that was wealthy. Of course, you had the French. You had French tutors that came to educate children in those various states and so forth. So when we take a look at education, you're exactly right. Public education has been the second single creator of an educated society. Public school and also the GI Bill. Okay.
That's right.
So let's go
again. Government impact. Government run programs. So when people are hearing, Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, talking about democratic socialism, and like you said earlier at the top of the show, everybody's throwing these terms around and don't even totally have an understanding of it. But if they actually looked at the terms and actually observed how these things operate in our society currently, they would understand that in a lot of ways, these are not bad words. When we're talking about socialism or communism, we're not talking about what you see, for example, down in South America and some countries in Africa, and some countries in Europe, where you've got, outright dictatorships, or in Asia. We're talking more so along the lines of what you may see right in the Scandinavian countries, right, where you got democracies, capitalistic systems, but they have, as you said, some safety nets, some things where the government actually does run it, like what you see in Canada. Canada has universal health coverage. Well, guess what? here in the United States, we have socialized type coverages. In fact,
Yeah.
former President Trump, when he came down with COVID-19, what hospital did he end up with? He ended up
Government hospital.
a government-run hospital, which is one of the best on the planet, where he got Bentley style healthcare covered by the government. And he got the top of the line healthcare that enabled him to be able to recover at his age, where a lot of others, perished at his age. Government run healthcare.
And Will, you bring up many important points, because when people say, "Oh, people just want a handout," people just social, they need to get up and work. But don't touch my Social Security. Don't touch my Medicare. Don't touch my benefits, that I have. All right.
Right.
But those people, those are the ones that need help, right? Those are the ones that are taking making our country terrible and just want to come here for a free handout or don't want to get up and work. So again, those are old tropes, right?
Right.
that we had before. Of course, created under the Reagan administration and pushed the welfare bomb and all that. But at the end of the day, we see that there is an inequality issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those that have and those that don't have, that gap is like this. I mean, we saw this, and the pandemic that we're living through didn't make it any better. It's simply
just exacerbating it. It's just really bringing it to the fore.
I'm telling you, it just, when you say it exacerbated, I mean, I don't think there's a word that really describes what the pandemic has really done. Mm-hmm. You have a bill that's introduced that they want to tax what they call the super rich, right? Mm. And only a 2% tax on the super rich. Will, the Lord said, give me 10%. All right? Mm. We only want 2. And they push it back on that, right?
Right.
Just 2. And when we talk about the super rich, we're not talking about people that, had a good year, right? They're able to, spend a little bit, maybe take a trip to Europe, maybe Italy, do some shopping, stuff like that. Maybe even buy that boat. Heck, maybe even buy that second vacation home, right? We're not talking about those people. But we're talking about individuals who are 0.5% of the U.S. population. So that means 99.95% of the people in our country are not there, okay? So that means 0.05% of the U.S. population are considered super rich. And those individuals that are worth $1 over $50 million.
Wow. So
man,
but even when you talk about the super rich now, to be fair, to be balanced, it is true that the 1%, the top earning 1%, does pay a huge amount of the share of the taxes, right? I believe isn't it about 39% or so of.
Well, actually, it went down. Actually, it went down. Keep in mind, it went down on the Bush. It went down under Trump. So it keeps going down. But yeah. So, but with that,
so it's not like it's not like folks that have great wealth are not paying taxes. They're in a lot of ways that wealth is buttressing the the economy, the country. All of us aspire to accumulate wealth and to again, we want to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That's the American way. So it's not that we're against taxing people fairly and honestly. And in fact, it seems to me like the IRS, is very quick to go after and audit people whose incomes are at lower levels. And I think that's where a lot of where a lot of people get bent out of shape when they hear this taxing of the rich and who should be paying their fair share. So I mean, I personally believe again in wealth, in acquiring wealth and paying fair share. But I think that people need to understand that all of these different systems are about achieving some measure of balance. So it's not when you're hearing democratic socialism. Again, I think the Democrats just do a poor job of really messaging and really clearly
absolutely.
explaining what it is that they're talking about. But when you look at it and you actually listen to what people have said and you actually read the documents of what they're saying that they're pushing for, democratic socialism is really sort of a
Yeah.
bridge between socialist principles and
Yeah.
capitalist principles where, you're saying the government is running certain parts of industry to help
Absolutely.
keep a balance for the society. Because what happens if you go purely capitalist, then what happens is if you fall back on the regulation, how it affects us is things like, terrible, pollution in your water,
Yep.
um,
Which which we, which
hotness.
we, which we had the mercury issue
Right.
in our ocean water because companies were dumping mercury into the ocean water instead of doing the right thing and disposing of it responsibly. Go ahead.
So if you have no government in play oversight on anything, then how do we manage to be able to function together? So those areas where so to speak, where our individual rights can clash
Yeah,
against each other, those are the areas where you need a referee. You need the
absolutely.
government, and you need a government that's supposed to be for the people, by the people. You need a government that you, in fact, run. You, in fact,
That's right.
support that government. You run that government through your representatives, and that's where the refereeing or the settling of disputes where our individual rights may clash. Now, the big problem that we have is now we got a lot of politicians who are in government who are actually voting for policies that undermine the interests of their own constituents because they're
And,
listening.
look, they do it and they spin it to make it think that it's a good thing. I mean,
Right,
think about it. We spend more dollars on spinning messages to sell something that's not good for people when we can use that money to actually do the right thing. But I want to go back to the socialism piece. If
right,
we take a look at Europe, now you mentioned Canada, all right? Canada is very similar to, I know they're in North America, but they're very similar in the way that they operate in their government to Europe.
right,
So let's take a look at European socialism. Europeans pay a higher tax rate, but there are a lot of services that they get that they don't have to pay for at all. Healthcare is one. In some countries, you can go to college all the way to a doctorate degree in what's called university studies
mm,
for free, right? Absolutely free. Now, of course, there's a person say that there's a quote unquote lower standard of living, but I disagree with that because the question becomes, what is your standard of living? Is your
right.
standard of living based upon time and value with family, culture, traveling, or is it based upon working, working, working? And that's where America and Europe disagree. Because in some places in Europe, when you first get a job, you get automatically 6 weeks vacation, paid
Right.
vacation. You
Yeah.
can take a vacation. Like you may get hired on Friday. You say, next month, Monday, I'm taking a 2 week vacation, right? On top of that, all right. So not only that, Will, but I remember this was in I think the late 90s or early 2000s when they implemented a 40-hour work week as opposed to a 35-hour work week in Europe.
Mm.
Man, people were in the streets marching in Germany. They were like, no, absolutely not. We're not doing this. And then I think in some instances you can work 4 days a week and not 5.
Right.
Hey, we work 24 hours a day. We're so connected. We need to become disconnect. We need to disconnect just to keep our our mental capacity.
Right. Right.
You know,
Yeah.
but when we talk about this again, I want people to understand that when we talk about socialism, democratic socialism, that's just a way of the wealthy and corporations to continue to erode the intervention of government during the Great Depression, that Social Security package that Roosevelt signed,
Right.
and to continue to eroding that. But let's take a look at this, Will. People say, hey, capitalism is great, but factories are closing because the government allowed companies to move their production overseas.
Overseas, right, to increase profit, right?
Exactly. And south of the border.
Right.
But capitalism is good. However, the Midwest became the Rust Bowl. The the middle of the country became another dust bowl. And not only that, but now you have very large sectors of our society that are suffering because there is lack of manufacturing. If we ask ourselves, what does America manufacture? What would you say?
Well, I would say I would think that we still do steel. I would think that we manufacture, technology and technological goods.
Well, is that
But
manufacturing or is that, brain power? So that's the difference. So we move
right,
toward a more service society and
exactly.
a thinking society than actual manufacturing society. Now, granted, because of the government's regulations, any military vehicles have to be made by on U.S. soil and by U.S. companies. So
Right.
we can't farm it out. So yeah, we still make ships to kill people, to protect our borders and to go against countries. We still make warplanes to do
And
that.
we still make guns, and we do a good job of exporting guns. Yeah,
Absolutely. So Will, I want to talk about, when we're talking about this Social Security PAC and socialism, and there's this big thing called guaranteed income. This is this idea. I remember watching one of the large network televisions early news reports several years ago. And actually, more than that. Gosh, those Trump years, man, kind of set you back a little bit. Like that was 5 years.
it's like it's all a blur, man.
We say, oh, it was 2020. Oh, it was the Trump era. It's like, I lost 5 years of my life. But in that, there were these individuals from the tech industry that wrote a book about guaranteed income, saying we need a guaranteed income. As a matter of fact, one of the presidential candidates, Democratic candidates, I forget his name, the Asian American, who actually, Yang, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Who had this big push in a group called the Yang Gang, right? So he was right. He said we need a guaranteed income to help people. And the city of Stockton, California.
Right. Stockton, California did the experiment on it and released their results recently.
Yeah. So Will, tell us a little bit about, what Stockton did.
So what they were doing is they gave $500 in income to individuals who lived in neighborhoods, I believe, that were about $43,000 median income or less. And what they found was that the individuals, instead of the old tropes, like you mentioned, and stereotypes of welfare queens taking the money and spending it on cigarettes and liquor and alcohol and carousing, what people did with that money is they bought food, they paid their utilities, they paid car notes. And some folks who were in positions where they just had part-time or gig type economy jobs, you're mentioning us moving to a service economy, they were actually able to go from part-time jobs or gig jobs to actual full-time jobs because they had this income that afforded them the opportunity to actually do a more functional, real job search. And actually, so they give this standard income of $500 a month and find that unemployment actually went down. Employment goes up. People were more than responsible in using this money and used it to really address some of the basic needs that they have. And so here, both of us have raised children. You can imagine if you were given an income like that and you got kids in childcare, you would be spending it on that. You would be spending it on something that would enable you to be able to be a more quality parent to your children, or you would be trying to pay down debt. So again, like you said, often what happens with the politicians, in order to gain favor, in order to just get in a position to get that office and then become beholden to these big special interests, we throw around a lot of these stereotypes about what people would do with the money and how people would be irresponsible. But in actuality, that's not the case. At least that's what they found in Stockton.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, it was called SEED. It's a Stockton economic empowerment distribution, I believe, but the acronym was SEED. And and again, how people say, oh, we're taking government money. Well, it wasn't government money. It was
privately funded. Yeah.
Private donations.
That's right.
$3 million, Will. And they distributed out to these individuals $500 a month, and the results came back, like you said. People worked more as opposed to less. They increased their income as opposed to decreased, right? They didn't buy alcohol, dope, drug, as people would say, right? So these things help individuals, like you said, get out and do what they want to do. And I think childcare is a big part of that. And they also pay off debt. Childcare is a big part of it. Think about it. We actually ran, my father and my mother wanted to start a business to help young mothers, and they wanted to start a school. So my father operated the ClaVille Daycare Center for 21 years.
Yeah, right? Excellent, man. That's excellent.
In our community. Started out in our garage where he got a $5,000 loan, small business loan, to refurbish the garage and create I think we could hold like 8 kids. And then from there, it expanded to a full operation where at the height of it, we were keeping between 65 and 75 kids. And bus service back and forth, so all the way up to where you got to preschool, that's where we stopped. And you went or kindergarten.
That's huge, man. That's a huge impact in the community. Yeah.
But here's the issue. It got to the point where the state started decreasing the amount that they would supplement families' income in order to pay the supplement for childcare. That it became basically the business model went from profit to major loss.
Cost prohibitive. So he either had to pass that cost on to the parents, or he had to eat it.
Yeah, but here's the thing. They didn't have the money to pay for it in the first place. So they don't have it to pay for it now. So it was cost prohibitive to run it, and then it was cost prohibitive for the mothers to try to send their kids to daycare, pay the full price, and only have a little money to work. So therefore, they relied upon the government to continue work, as opposed to keeping that supplement at this point, so they can allow to work, so that they can go out and work and be more productive. So we saw it in real life. And with this guaranteed income, I think that now we can start to peg what we call the living wage to this guaranteed income to help individuals with childcare, help individuals to pay XYZ expenses. And I think that by creating this guaranteed income, we see it in the pandemic. People are staying afloat by the stimulus that they're getting. Now, just imagine if people got stimulus, every 3 months, right? Kind of like the oil revenue checks that Alaskans get, right?
Right.
They get those checks, they pay off bills, right? They pay off certain things, and that money goes right back into the economy. So we've seen where that stimulus, people say, people need to get out there and work. And they found with that stimulus, what were people doing? Paying bills. So,
but that's the thing, is that the pure capitalists, they don't believe that, the government should be paying the freight in any way, shape, or form, but that the private sector, again, or the philanthropic community would pick up that gap. So, like you said, in the case of your parents and those parents that were using, their daycare business, they ended up having to go on the government dole. Well, the pure capitalists would say, you need to get rid of that government dole too. And then who they would actually be able to turn to is the church or the philanthropic. There would be organizations that would privately fund that kind of social safety net. And, I think people really need to understand what it is that we're talking about. If that's what you believe, do you really believe that the church will be able to pick up that gap? Do you really believe that private organizations will pick up that gap? If you believe that, and if you are clear that you really understand that that's what you're saying when you're arguing against some of these social, government-run social programs, then I say, hey, okay, then go for it. And I hope that you never find yourself in a situation of that kind of need. But oftentimes we hear people saying that, they're not for these government programs. And then as soon as you say something to them like, okay, Well, do you like your Social Security? Oh no! Oh no! Hell no! Don't touch my Social Security.
Don't touch it. Don't touch it. And
So
look,
I think that's what it is, man. We got to be clear on what it is
that's
that
right.
we're talking about, man.
And will Social Security reform is coming because we kicked that can down the street so many times. So I'm an advocate for the reform, but I'm also in order to keep it because we're coming up on that age. So, man, look, this has been a phenomenal discussion. At the end of the day, we saw the experiment in Stockton help communities, more specifically communities of color, poor communities. So when we're talking about people's policies, right, and policies, public policy, they help the common man. What is it that you think that us, African Americans and other poor communities, communities of colors that are struggling, should advocate for as it relates to this guaranteed wage? I mean, guaranteed income.
I think what our communities need to do is to understand exactly what is being proposed. Take the time to understand what is being proposed and then break it down into your individual life situation. Just like you just talked about your parents and the business that they were running, how that was impacting the community and what that actually means. And if you understand what is being proposed when you hear things like universal health care, think about what that would mean. When you and I look at our incomes and we see that payment going towards healthcare every 2 weeks, and then when we go to the doctor and they're saying, oh, by the way, you got a co-payment. Oh, by the way, you have a deductible. You know that you're paying a huge amount to get healthcare. So when you say universal healthcare and you just, and I didn't mention that also there's a Medicare payment in there.
That's right.
That's going to, and the Social Security payment that's in there in your income too. So we need to understand what is being proposed and advocate for things like health care, Medicare for all. We need to advocate for things like, these kinds of income or stipends that allow to go directly to areas of need, utilities and the such that will help people to be able to get, over the top. Because these stipends, these payments, they exist in other areas. Ask some of the farmers who are paid not to grow certain crops. Ask, some of the businesses, some of the oil companies that get, underwriting, or the businesses that get tax breaks to come in and do certain development. So it is happening. Government is underwriting a whole lot of private industry activity.
And keep in mind, one of the first things that especially Republican administrations do, the moment they get in office, in the first 15 months, they pass a tax cut for that top 1%, 2%, 3%. And and everybody says, oh, they know how to make money for people, rich people, so it's okay. Again, messaging. Well, we're going to talk about this topic some more because we're talking about living wage. We're talking about people
absolutely
doing the right thing. But this is it for this episode of LaVeist and ClaVille. Catch us on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Thank everyone who is supporting us. Thank you for your comments. And until then, that's the way we see it. That's the way it is. We'll see you next time.